Hello and welcome to another episode of the Business of the Business podcast. I am your co-host, JP John Podge, for the two-man power trip, and joining me is my co-host, the financial wrestling genius, Mr. Lavi Margolin. Lavi, how you doing today, sir?
Hey, John, I'm doing good. A couple episodes ago or thereabouts, we covered everything about TNA, and then things blew up, as everyone knows by this point. So we're here to do another deep dive and talk about D'Amore. Uh, we have D'Amore to talk about. I'm trying to make a joke. I'm
Yes,
not sure if that rolls off the tongue,
yes.
but Scott D'Amore leaving TNA, so much to talk about.
The interesting thing here is nothing really crazy happened like where like Vince stuff where he had to resign. Like it doesn't seem like any of that, or especially none of it's come out yet, but it doesn't seem like that's the case here with TNA and Scott Demore. But rather than maybe just Anthem wanted to go one way, he wanted to go another. He maybe wanted to purchase them, and they said no way, and then basically kind of like ended their relationship. So, what is the story? Is it salacious? Is it hot? I mean, what's the news here? What's going on?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of clues along the way that will focus on that, help us to understand a little bit more of the story. Just because there's so much news outlets reporting on, and sometimes in conflicting ways, it got a little bit conflated. I always like to give credit where it's due, but certainly House of Wrestling, Wrestling Observer, Fightful, PW Insider, other outlets helping to aggregate that information and tweets and so on. So everybody, thank you. But let's get into this, sort of like to give us a little bit of an understanding, taking some steps back. There were a lot of people assuming something salacious happened to lead to D'Amore's exit, but we are told by sources close to Anthem that wasn't the case. While no one is clear as to why this decision was made, over the last day, the belief seems to settle on the idea that Len Asper, the head of Anthem, and D'Amore came to a crossroad where they disagreed on how TNA should be operated, and only one person was going to win that butting of the heads Asper. So that makes sense. The word making the rounds over the last day or so is that at some point in recent weeks, D'Amore approached Anthem with an offer to buy TNA outright from Anthem, said to have been backed by a letter with a major banking institution, but it was rebuffed. We have heard from some on the Anthem side that it was seen as a legitimate offer that was worthy of consideration, but the decision was made not to accept. If Anthem wanted to do away with TNA, they could have just sold it off to D'Amore or sold bids or sought bids from WWE, AEW. There's been no evidence of that. If he was making an offer to buy the asset and walk away with it, that means D'Amore knew the clock was ticking on the job and wanted to try and keep something he felt was important to him personally. Like Bischoff once trying to buy WCW, D'Amore made an effort, but it didn't happen. We are told D'Amore was aware at least a week to 10 days ago the change was coming, so this wasn't a shock firing out of nowhere, even if it was announced yesterday and shocked everyone. This was something coming out over several weeks as we had gotten word of it a few weeks ago and were working to confirm the story. We are told there were lots of meetings to plan out how things would work post D'Amore, and that Anthem took a look at everything internally they could improve upon by integrating TNA under their entertainment wing. This wasn't some knee-jerk reaction that something evil had happened, but that hasn't stopped some from assuming that because McMahon was exposed that something surely happened to D'Amore, even if it's not rooted in reality. So, of trying to buy the company, right? Like, if he knew it was ending, sort of like making a last-ditch effort, but if he was still employed there, that sort of seems inappropriate to try to make an offer. Something that I wasn't aware of. This was uh, Conrad Thompson mentioning on the podcast, I believe Rick Bischoff, that his understanding is that D'Amore is wealthy or successful in other businesses. So um, while accessing bank monies, that he actually would be able to put in a bid on his own, or being the major bidder, from what I understand, which I wasn't aware. I thought that the pro wrestling was keeping him quite busy. So that was something else to consider.
Well, not only that, I know Conrad probably knows some of the inside stuff, but he also inherited a lot of money as well from his family. So he's pretty wealthy without the wrestling business per se being a big part of his life. So he's well to do. He's well off for sure.
Okay, so that makes a lot of sense. So then there
Yeah.
was a statement from the new president, Anthony Ciccione. I'm excited and honored to be the new president of TNA, a company rich in tradition and loved by pro wrestling fans worldwide. This move is intended to further integrate TNA into the entertainment group of Anthem Sports and Entertainment as we work to leverage the resources of the entire company to add more value in areas such as production, distribution, marketing, viewership, customer acquisition, digital revenues, ad sales, sponsorships, digital tech, among others. Everyone at Anthem is appreciative and thankful for years of dedication of D'Amore gave to Anthem and TNA. Sky's been apart since 2003, and so on. TNA is in a position to take a big leap towards its next stage of growth and expansion. While we can create more operational efficiency, the most exciting part is expanding existing revenue streams and developing new ones. Wrestling promotions have evolved from event-driven business to global media. I was in Las Vegas last month for the Hard to Kill and next night Snake Eyes. Those were not just the two best pro wrestling shows I've attended, they were record-setting for TNA on multiple fronts. That growth, expansion, and popularity that thousands witnessed live and in person and live on pay-per-view will continue. We have many exciting, groundbreaking announcements coming out over the next few months. Our momentum is continuing. TNA features an incredible roster of in-ring talent who continue to shine, deliver, and so on. We know departure of well-respected executives can create uncertainty, but we are fully committed to this new business model. We are entering a new stage. These changes bring together more leadership experiences to help us elevate our operation. Another question, end of that. Another question yet to be answered is what this all means for the fledgling relationship between TNA and WWE that began with Jordan Grace. The belief is that D'Amore was heavily involved in building this relationship. If and how it continues to develop remains to be seen, but TNA will have to tap someone else to continue to build that rapport with Paul Levesque and the rest of WWE. Actually, this gives me a moment to talk a little bit about my understanding of the deal that TNA has with TKO's parent company. The way that Conrad Thompson had portrayed it, or it was more maybe on the business podcast, Rick Bischoff and so on, among those family, was that in terms of thinking about selling TNA, well, those rights are already gone. My understanding of TNA's relationship with Endeavor is that Endeavor is the platform host for the TNA subscription service. Endeavor doesn't hold any rights to TNA beyond whatever this agreement is, meaning to host it. So what I would guess would be TNA signed an agreement deal where they pay Endeavor a certain amount of money to host, stream, payment process, everything like that, but that Endeavor doesn't hold the rights to TNA beyond the scope of this deal. If TNA were to sell someone else and someone else were to say, like, well, we want to stream at this place, they would just have to look at what this contract was, assuming that they signed with Endeavor. So I don't think they've lost any rights to their streaming beyond the scope of that deal. So then there was apparently an all-talent call with Tommy Dreamer, who may or may not have more power. We'll talk about that in a few minutes, telling talent that if they were unhappy and wanted to be released from the deals, they could have those discussions with the corporation privately. Then later it was disputed whether he said that or not. One story making rounds, this is from PW Insider, is that Anthem wanted the TNA brand to be more in line with the parent company going forward, and that the brand had been too D'Amore-centric, with Scott D'Amore as the face of the company. I agree with that. I think D'Amore, as we talked about, John, maybe before the new year, D'Amore had really inserted himself as like the face of TNA, which has a value to it, but also like, I think, did he have like sort of a gimmick match or something like that, like where he was very much becoming more part of the brand, and I could see like Len Asper being like, what's going on here, just speculating. I think he was not watching week to week, but just a few steps removed from social media and so on. Like, it was sort of like, what's going on with D'Amore? Like, how much attention does he need in running this company? Another aspect to consider, which again no one talks about it but us, is that from my understanding, Northern Pacific Group owns Anthem. So it's not Len Asper, the Asper family. Len Asper manages Anthem. Anthem is owned by Northern Pacific Group. That's as far as I know it to be, in terms of looking at some of these financial sites and acquisition sites. That's certainly publicly out there. To learn more about Anthony Ciccione, who is already a president of their entertainment division, um, more than 30 years of broadcast and digital media experience. He oversees all financial performance and operations for Access TV, HDNet, Game TV, Game Plus, Fight Network, and Anthem Media Services. 10 years of VP of Programming and Production, 10 years of sports producer, various roles with Olympic broadcasts. People have referred to probably a small deal for WWE with The Score, I believe, in Canada. A question that comes up to me, and this was actually put in a press release from March 2023, was this ever put in Richard Schaefer's portfolio, who we know from Golden Boy, right? The once top boxing promotion. Schaefer is coming on board as the president of Anthem Sports Group, a newly formed subsidiary of Anthem Sports. They'll oversee Impact, Invicta, and the Fight Network. And then there was a little tidbit where a few months ago, Deborah Cufaro was hired as a senior VP of advertising sales, who would lead a new linear sales channel team, which would spearhead sponsorship for properties, including Impact Wrestling, and she would report to Ciccione. So it's a question of Schaefer, like, he still has the role of president, but he founded Golden Boy. He developed and negotiated deals with HBO, Showtime, and so on. Some of the biggest fights. So, like, what's his position in Anthem? Because I would think it would be much greater. But he came in sort of like as an outsider, where you have Ciccione already being well established. TNA parent company Anthem Sports will be stepping in, taking a much larger role in the day-to-day management strategies. TNA will be folded into Anthem's entertainment arm going forward, as opposed to existing in its own corner. This idea is that it will allow TNA to become embraced more by Anthem and have a stronger synergy in order to maximize what each side has to offer. As part of the integration, D'Amore has been removed from power and is gone effective immediately. As I mentioned, Ciccione is he also has the title President 278 Media Inc. Since 2008. I don't know if that's his own consulting practice or if it's related. I assume he'd be quite busy as VP of Operations with Anthem since 2008 as well. He's taught a college course on sports media. He's been a segment producer with Olympic Broadcast and so on. He graduated in 1988 from Ryerson University, which actually Ariel Schnerer, who we'll talk about in a few minutes, also graduated from the same place a lot later. He's a lot younger. Now, in terms of D'Amore, he had posted, or I think it's his promotion, right? Border City Wrestling. He posted a picture of himself in the Border City Wrestling ring. So, if he's quite motivated to take a bigger place in the world of pro wrestling, if he were to buy TNA, right, he have the talent under contract, but he wouldn't necessarily be able to continue the Access TV and Anthem deals that they have. So maybe Border City Wrestling can undergo a name change, and he takes the leap with that. But all we know so far is a picture. But interestingly, on March 8th and 9th at St. Clair College in Windsor, TNA had already been booked there, which is D'Amore's like home area. And where I think Border City Wrestling had run shows on occasion as well. So even more news coming out as we're recording this. The existing TNA creative team of Tommy Dreamer, R.D. Evans, who I actually know and got to work on a project that actually didn't come to fruition. We spent a week together, good guy. And Hunter Johnson will remain in place and continue to work as they did prior to D'Amore's departure. This is from PW Insider. The existing team will be supported by Gail Kim, who is already one of the top officials for the company and does so many things from a talent perspective. Jorge Barbosa has also joined the creative process. Barbosa has been a senior producer for Anthem Sports and Entertainment. So if Dreamer isn't the person in charge, who is? Ariel Schnerer, who's been, we'll talk about, with Anthem forever, will be overseeing all TNA content going forward and be working in conjunction with Anthony Ciccione. It'll be Schneider who will have the last word on any talent and creative decisions, although Sicioni will be at the top of the pyramid. Schneider is the former general manager of Fight Network and has been involved in TNA since acquisition. He appeared on TV from time to time as Dr. Ariel, but behind the scenes is where he was really important as he manages the distribution of TNA across Anthem and was involved in securing TNA deals for DAZN, a number of streaming deals with Roku and Pluto TV. He also spearheaded the launch of TNA Plus. So if anyone is head of creative going forward, it's Schneider, not Dreamer. Yes, maybe he'll sign off on it, but he has no creative background, right? So he would need to rely on the people previously mentioned. PW Insider has confirmed that Schneider will be overseeing all TNA content going forward and will be working in conjunction with Sicioni. Schneider, who will have the last word on any talent creative decisions. Okay, so that we covered. So a little bit more color on Schneider, who I've been aware of for a while. I've emailed him to come on the podcast and hear back from years ago. Vice President of Business and Development since 2020. Fight Network General Manager. It's still listed as the present, despite the PW Insider report. TNA Entertainment Director Global Distribution 2018 to 2020. Senior Director Programming Anthem Sports 2013 to 2020. Programming Manager Fight Network and Webmaster. So really came up through Asper's company. House of Wrestling has confirmed that while still an executive for Anthem Sports and Entertainment, Ed Nordholm, name we hadn't heard in a while, is also no longer actively working on the TNA brand. Nordholm still serves as an executive for Anthem, but no longer with TNA. He was on the video call to talent and staff announcing D'Amore's departure and Sicioni's promotion, but was the only present in his Anthem executive capacity. Those that we spoke with described Nordholm as someone who was regularly by D'Amore's side, who were very close. One source indicated that the decision was made for Nordholm to cease his work with TNA several weeks ago, likely around when the wheels were put in motion for D'Amore's exit. We've also been told that Nordholm is no longer working on the sports side of Anthem in general. So that's the side in terms of where it's currently structured. However, there was a letter that was sent. I don't know if it was signed and if somebody created like a burner email to send the letter. Somebody took responsibility of actually emailing it to Len Asper and the team. Len and Scott, TNA Impact is not just our employer and the company for which we work. It's a family that each of us has grown to love and cherish and trust with our bodies and our careers. A family for which we feel deeply and the desire above all else is to protect. We are deeply saddened by the decision to remove Scott D'Amore from the TNA family. Scott is a brilliant wrestling mind that has guided this company, has positioned it to take the next step upward in our industry. Scott is also so much more than this. He's a trusted friend and confident, and so on. So a lot there. So that's the Moore situation, John.
A lot of stuff to unpack there. Jeez, there's so much going on with Anthony. I guess it's Chacon or CSO. I'm not sure how to pronounce the name, but somebody messaged me and said, "Hey, get Lavi to message him. He needs to be on Business to the Business." I said, "I totally agree. We got to get him on now for sure."
I think I've cracked the code of how the Anthem emails work. In our first, our fifth episode, we were, and for those on the podcast, I'm holding up the this close sign. We were this close to having Len Asper.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah. Yep.
He actually had committed to it, and then his assistant said, "I'm sorry, he's not available." And I was like, "Oh, no problem. Next time, we're happy to talk to him anytime." But I didn't hear back, so maybe he thought of it as a little bit less insider than it is. Typically, he only appears on that I'm aware of recently, Bloomberg Canada. But would have loved to have Len. Len, if you're listening, we'd love to have you. Or Anthony, Ariel, any of the players, even Scott. We'd love to have insight from all those angles.
So with D'Amore being gone, I know they did a lot of stuff in Canada. Maybe that might kind of move, not really away because the company was really based in Canada too, but it seemed like a lot of stuff was going on there. Is Vegas going to be maybe a new home for them? Because it seems like that's a home run for them.
Yeah, I think it's certainly worth coming back to try. I think it was like the right timing with like the TNA rebranding. Everyone was like very positive about things. So they may have a bit of a wake up call when they return to Vegas with the Palms. I mean, it's not a gigantic space, so they can make it work regardless. As of this recording, it's about to be on sale like in a day, but it's not yet on sale. So we'll have that next time or soon. But I think that's a good idea. They'll be in Philly as well, 2300 Arena in March, and we talked about the Ontario taping. So fair enough. The Palms is probably a little bit more of an expensive venue to book than St. Clair College, certainly, or 2300 Arena maybe. But we talked about that balance. Like there had been word that TNA was going to book bigger venues, which didn't really make sense, and that push and pull of like, I think these are the right size venues for them right now. But sometimes you try a little bit, like it worked out in Vegas.
Good financially for them too. I mean, they were making a ton of money for those two shows back to back and belly to belly in Vegas.
Yeah, if you can draw for two shows in a row, like the cost of doing business, you've already have the talent in town. You didn't have to move. You didn't have to set up. Maybe you could get a deal for 2 nights in a hotel, that sort of thing.
I mean, it's not U2 at the Sphere, but it's very, very impressive for them to go out to Vegas and sell those two shows out back to back.
Yeah, for their level, I think they're doing well, and even it's probably especially with D'Amore there that they understood who they were, and I know D'Amore was pushing for a bigger budget. The one talent that he was trying to sign in 2021, Braun Strowman, the bloom has been. I mean, I think he's recovering, so I don't want to shade him at all, but like his profile has certainly diminished over the years. Like I was very surprised when WWE released him, although there was like that thing where he'd go like choo choo, and like that really took a lot of heat off him. But I don't see him like having been like if they were going to blow up their budget for someone. I don't think Braun Strowman would have been a great idea. Certainly CM Punk would have been, depending on the price and whatever it was, like would have been a game changer.
Man, Punker think that he's out for Mania, but looks like he'll be hanging around. So at least maybe he'll be on it. He just won't be wrestling.
Yeah, I think the sales for his toy with the dog will have closed. I just learned by then, so he'll be back focusing on WWE business.
Okay, M&A. What do you mean by M&A instead of TNA? M&A.
Yeah, so mergers and acquisitions, right? We have a merger and we have an acquisition. So first, the merger. Progress Wrestling of the UK and Defy of Seattle have joined forces in a major merger in the world of pro wrestling. The merger will create a truly global presence for both organizations with mutual benefit for both parties and need further expansion plans that will offer something really exciting for wrestling fans around the world. Progress, of course, has been around since 2012. Defy is in its 7th anniversary. Jim Perry of Defy said, I've been admiring Progress from the start. And in some ways, they helped inspire the creation of Defy. We have known each other for a number of years and been working on many collaborations, including our successful double show in London last August. I'm very excited about the opportunities of our more formal coming together. Martin Best of Progress, and Lee and I really welcome Jim and Matt Farmer joining us at Progress. We'll continue our closeness in Philadelphia. The most interesting part to me at the moment, Defy will also soon be seen on Demand Progress Plus. So Defy, as we've talked about with Matt Farmer on the show previously, like they're always like, whatever goes left, they go right, and so on. They build out their WrestleMix, like fast streaming platform. They've hosted their own. Like sometimes, like it's hard to stand on your own with a platform. So people that follow Progress and Defy, I think there's a fair amount of crossover with like the type of hard-hitting wrestling it is, no matter what side you are on the pond. So however they've worked out this deal, it makes sense. Now, the acquisition part, Empire State Wrestling is expanding its footprint outside New York State. ESW acquired Pro Wrestling Rampage, a promotion based in Erie, Pennsylvania. With the acquisition, ESW will now operate the wrestling events held at the Saga Club on Washington Avenue on Erie. The first event under the new ownership, Gem City Madness, will be held Friday, March 9th. And then Pro Wrestling Rampage had shared Exciting news, Empire State Wrestling is our new owner. We encourage everyone to attend to be part of the next chapter of independent wrestling.
Love mergers and acquisitions. Love that. I thought there might be a new league or something. TNA, MNA. That's what I was thinking.
You know who loves M&A even more than you, John? The big bankers.
Oh,
When
yeah.
especially when it's a TKO deal, you get a little big slice of that. It makes it all worthwhile.
What in the world is going on with Bushiroad right now and New Japan Pro Wrestling?
Yeah, so apparently a lot. It's hard to read what's going on behind the scenes in Japan, besides what we're hearing in the stock price, which is down 50% over the last year. But in terms of understanding what's going on in the U.S., they found their, in a way, they found their footing in terms of potentially big shows in the U.S. to a degree, right? They ended up doing really well in San Jose in the return there for about 2,000 tickets. In Chicago, we've talked about the rollout about that. They're going to exceed 5,000 tickets distributed if they haven't already. And they announced a May 11th show in California, in Ontario, at the Toyota Center, which is an 11,000 seat building. So they'll scale that down or roll that out slowly. But I think putting the spotlight on things in terms of a non-major market where they can probably draw fans is worth trying. Interestingly, in a small tidbit, we know that MLW has been working with New Japan, so New Japan has the content rights to show Kojima's title win from MLW on New Japan World, so a little bit of extra content. Unfortunately, he got injured, so likely he'll keep the belts depending on what the injury is, because MLW doesn't run that often, so there's that. Then, excuse me, Fight Opinion. Regarding Stardom, I think there's a realistic working deal to be made between Bushiroad and Tony Khan. A possible bridge loan, convertible equity. TK buys Stardom, owns the town contracts, while Bushiroad gets paid yearly a management fee to run operations. The main theme nationally regarding Stardom is where they can survive. Most contracts reportedly expire in March. Will there be a talent exodus? Unless there's a big financier available, the idea of a talent exodus is a bluff. It's Kadani, not Rosie, who has Tony Khan. Then, and what might be one of the biggest news stories, Rocky Romero is now part of the AEW front office. So from what I understand, like Rocky Romero was like the face and the face that ran the place of New Japan in the U.S. and North America, facilitating these deals. But now he's in the AEW front office. And he's also wrestling with CMLL, which, he's always been busy with everything. But so are his ties now severed with New Japan? Will he just be a talent? I don't know how he can be office with New Japan and AEW at the same time. So something has to sort itself out.
That is interesting because it seems like they're losing Ospreay to AEW. Now, they're losing possibly Okada to AEW, and now they're losing a front office guy in Rocky Romero to AEW. It's crazy.
Yeah, with AEW, I mean, people have benefited. Impact, now TNA had that pop with the ratings and the pop with a buy rate and so on, but some people were critical of that creatively, but I think that was very beneficial to TNA. But with AAA, how much has AAA benefited from the AEW relationship? Now, New Japan benefited a lot with Forbidden Door and getting a spotlight, but if they're going to take their talent, what does that mean? We're seeing CMLL benefit now too, but what will ultimately happen with that? So when you're dealing with the second biggest company in the U.S. and certainly dealing with the first, you have to be very careful in terms of exposing your talent. What will happen? And NWA, right? Billy Corgan had some issues with dealing with AEW as well. Maybe some of his talents crossing over in a way, and even Court Bauer, he got hurt a little bit. I mean, they didn't have MLW never appeared on AEW, but a lot of the talents got pulled to AEW, which, I mean, that's reasonable. It makes sense. Even under an MLW contract, I understand it wouldn't be it might be exclusive to them, but like going to AEW, then you're not only have like a full-time job, but you know, you can make multiples.
Interesting thing is that going to hurt the New Japan AEW relationship that they're taking some of their guys, or is it like an open deal where, hey, Osprey and Okada can still wrestle for New Japan? They're just going to have right of first refusal by AEW.
Yeah, I think it really depends on like how you do it. Like, not that this is the best relationship to lean on, but like right, like when Paul Heyman had to deal with like WWF quietly, like he would help shepherd them, or like they would know when they were leaving so they can say goodbye or like wind down a feud and so on. So like just like in a job, right, when somebody works and they give 2 weeks notice,
Yep.
you know, as compared to like a month, um, depending on what they can do, like it's a better transition. So I think there's a way you can do it without it being like totally opportunistic on AEW's part and still maintain that relationship and just know like, right, like I don't want to paint New Japan as a minor league, but like just that there's opportunity and then there's like opportunity. So, and it's really only fair as an employer or independent contractor hirer to give your talent the opportunity to grow while still maintaining a good relationship.
When you look at New Japan and like their relationships and maybe major league relationship, MLW seems to be a relationship maybe that's flourishing because they're using some of their footage now.
Yeah, so that like MLW always announces deals with like worldwide promotions, so never know what to make out of it. But you know they've had some talent come to MLW. It seemed like they were helping facilitate, at least at the time, Fatu getting a match with New Japan in the U.S. Maybe that was done independently, but it seemed to like come at the same time. And then, like I mentioned, the footage coming to New Japan World. So yeah, so it seems to work. But you know, MLW has to deal with New Japan and CMLL, and those were kind of the CMLL one especially were kind of like unique, but AEW continues the relationship with uh, New Japan continues the relationship with AEW to a bigger degree, and now CMLL has to deal with a relationship with AEW as well. So I don't know how much MLW gets out of it outside of like Mystico coming to 2300 Arena and so on, which we'll talk about in a few minutes.
So weird that they just continue to lose guys like Okada, like Osprey, like their biggest names, but yet when they go to Chicago, they sold 5,000 tickets. How in the world did that happen, and what's going on there?
So I think there's just like a certain, and I kind of felt like it was almost over, but like, hey, you know, now it's back in. There's a certain cachet, and like New Japan built a lot of credibility over the years with like hardcore wrestling fans, whether it was through the newsletters, the magazines, even WCW, right? Like you'd have the series with Flair, but New Japan talents would flow through, and there was just something to that. And then certainly with the Ring of Honor deal, really working relationship, really establishing that through access and so on, so that there's so much credibility built. And for a way, not no matter how many, but as long as you can maintain a core roster of talents that are exclusive or primarily in New Japan, there will be an interest to that. I don't think they can run these like secondary shows where it's just like a little smattering of Japanese talent or like loosely affiliated American talent that are representing New Japan as main eventers. But if you could bring over the main eventers that for a while, as long as it's appealing and unique and not overdone, you should be able to draw. I don't know every time. 5,000 is a pretty great number,
Yeah.
but if it's worthwhile and you can do just under 2,000, especially if you charge higher ticket prices, then it should be worthwhile.
Bushi Road, they got a lot of stuff going on with them right now. Stardom as well. Rocky Romero leaving Okada. It just feels like whether it's positive or negative, they got a lot of attention right now.
Yeah, I think things have to sort of sort out in Japan, which you know some of the issues are clearly bigger than pro wrestling. I don't know how they're trading card and video game and anime and so on businesses are doing. Apparently, in total, maybe not that well, but to see like how pro wrestling continues to fit in there. But I guess like from an American perspective, like it's less. I mean, it's important that they're healthy, but less so, especially with having AEW available as like a major brand.
What is going on with GC Dub?
So our friends at WrestleTix gifted a very interesting tidbit that actually came from Polestar data. You wouldn't often see like GCW and Polestar, but they had the numbers for Talia Hall in Chicago that they sold 537 tickets, sell out, and a ticket prices of $30 to $75 a show. And I think the total was about $24,000 for that show. So a nice success for them there. We don't often get such specific data. Now, GCW has a number of shows upcoming, but wanted to highlight Dallas, Detroit, and Rochester is doing particularly well in advance of the collective. Dallas, as of this recording, was into its fifth row in general admission. Detroit, I'm not sure if it's four ways around because it might be like a stage or sloping. So there are multiple rows in. And Rochester, it looks like it's a smaller venue because they just have 3 rows. Or I think the venue they're using can be set up generally for 1,000 or 300 for a concert. Maybe they're using the smaller part, but there's 3 rows that are gone, and they've been in the general admission for a while. So they're doing well there. They're returning to LA on April 20th and Phoenix on June 16th. So those both follow sellouts. Interestingly, Danhausen, very evil, he is returning to GCW, and that should be an interesting draw for them. March 9th in Atlantic City, March 23rd in Detroit, and March 24th in Rochester.
Wow, does that mean that he's gone from AEW, or he's allowed to take outside bookings?
I would expect that he's allowed to take some outside bookings, but I don't think he had been for a while. But I know that his profile with AEW had been greatly lessened, but he still continues to be one of the top T-shirt sellers according to Pro Wrestling Tees and the WrestleNomics data that I last looked at, if that continues.
What about the NWA?
So the NWA, their Hard Times pay-per-view coming up later in March. So it looks like they're doing okay for their venue in Alabama. Again, I think a great venue selection there. But I guess most interestingly is the continued development of territories, meaning utilizing somewhere that's been established that runs shows semi-regularly and then either rebranding it to NWA. In this case, NWA Chicago is being branded as such on March 8th, and they're using Studio One, which is a smaller place, obviously. So interesting to see like what the plan is with this going forward in terms of standalone, because the NWA has some contracts under contract or ongoing deals, right? Like EC3 and Kerry Morton. So they're in the poster. Interestingly, I knew Kerry was in college, and he's also a member of the cheer squad, I believe. But he's also the social media manager for NWA, which I think is smart. Like, if you have people like under contracts and deals, right? Like, you can't keep them that busy with wrestling. So rather than hire somebody outside of that, they have like an administrative or managerial or office type based role that they can utilize.
Oh, very interesting. Very cool. Now, as far as MLW is concerned, they've got a pretty good one coming up in New York City.
Yeah, so the aforementioned Rocky Romero, February 29th is going against Mystico. So much like politics rolled into that match. Um, so February 29th, New York. March 29th, the Tampa St. Pete area, and then Chicago, May 11th for the Azteca Lucha show. And although they've been they've been posting jobs for quite a while, but newly posted is a video package editor. After Effects experience mandatory for consideration. So I don't know if they're expanding or replacing, in terms of that role. So a little bit going on with MLW at the moment ahead of their forthcoming show.
Are they gaining some momentum now with Kojima as champion?
It got attention. I'm not sure if momentum. I think it's gonna take like the year to like see how things settle out. Did they grow? Are they in a better position? Younger talent or some of the more buzzworthy talent seems to keep migrating out. You can sort of be a place for all nations, right? Like a super international indie type of thing where you can not always, but you can have talent like Mystico and Rocky Romero Jr. to appeal and fill in gaps, but that's not like a week to week answer there. So I think things creatively and contractually have to shake out for them.
I did notice though selling better tickets with Kojima when he won the title than when Alex Kane was champion. So I'm not sure if it was that much of a difference, but there was definitely a difference there.
That's interesting. Like to me, I would think like short term gain, long term loss, maybe. Like nothing against Kojima. Obviously, he's a veteran in the sport and one of the first MLW champions. But Alex Kane is not overexposed. Has a unique background, a unique look, and catchphrases and all that sort of stuff. So, like, I think he didn't really get a chance to get his feet under him. And one of the strengths of MLW had been like giving a super long run to Fatu, to Hammerstone, those sorts of things that really built them. Maybe it's thinking that maybe we shouldn't build people in such a way right now because they'll just leave. So let's just maximize the assets that we have.
Tell me about Beyond Wrestling and Matt Cardona.
Yeah, so I think Beyond Wrestling defines it as like their biggest show or most ambitious show yet, having running this show, Shamrock Slam, where I think it's up to 2,000 people can be there. It's part of like this ongoing event or weekend, so it's just a little something to keep track of outside of the Wrestling Open that's run week to week.
Maybe the most important story we're going to be talking about today. Let's talk about Big Little Brawlers. Lavi, tell me all about it and give me the ratings too.
Yeah, so I'm trying to find the right little person wrestling is the best way to put that appropriately. So they're on Discovery Channel, which is a very highly rated network. Number one show on Discovery, Gold Rush, is 1.7 million. Big Little Brawlers is the 9th most watched show on the network. That's tied with Wild and Weird America, Outback, Opal Hunters. So 326,000 is was their rating one week, but just looking at a number of weeks in January, in the P2s, 326,000, 359,000, 323,000. So sort of on its own, it's a very good number if you think about it in the pro wrestling landscape. It's right up there with WoW, competitive with AEW secondary programming. But for Discovery, the 9th most watched program, I don't know what that means for them, right? Because they run a lot of these shows continuously, marathons and so on. So what that really means is if there's a renewal, we'll know if it's working. So an unscientific survey that I ran on X, what property will finish 2024 with the highest ratings? Maybe I shouldn't have run the poll like during the Super Bowl. I might have gotten that response, but people still feel that AEW will be the highest rated, Big Little non-Dynamite programming, Big Little Brawlers, and then WoW.
Big Little Brawlers, maybe more popular than we know. And I know you love non-Dynamite AEW, but I don't know. I might have to go Big Little Brawlers on that one.
Yeah, that's what I think that, especially if it catches on more like behind the Discovery brand, if they have enough runway to do so, it could become one of their tent poles. Something going on with the little person wrestling as we followed for years that from an undercurrent, they tend to draw well, and different promotions and crisscross the U.S. And so on. And they're even having a show in Times Square at the formerly named PlayStation Theater. Not for me, but if it's for someone, then they can go enjoy that. But it seems a little bit too ambitious. That's an expensive place to run. And I think they're trying to do it for 2 nights or 2 days in a row. So curious to see how that all turns out.
Finally, maybe the greatest story that we could tell. ICP, are they back? Is Insane Khan possibly coming back?
Yeah, so I was surprised to see this didn't get more attention yet. JCW has been notorious in some ways in the pro wrestling landscape, from having their own promotion to the gathering of the Juggalos, those wild shows and scenes, in which we've heard from some of the participants on this show. But Juggalo Championship Wrestling presents Carneyland Rumble, electrifying event in the realm of wicked professional wrestling, characterized by its unique twist on the classic over-the-top rope elimination match. Um, this is part of their Awakening Juggalo weekend. I don't know if this replaces what they used to do, like Gathering of Juggalos in Cave Rock, Illinois. This is just a much smaller, less crazy iteration of this indoors, because Boeing Center at Techport in San Antonio looks like a very classy venue. So I don't think a lot of what's going on in the past would go on there. So this is just a part of it. So it'll be hard to like suss out how popular this is as compared to other elements, but good to see, especially if the wrestlers get some work from something like this over a 2-day period.
Man, ICP, never leaving the business. My God, right? I mean, they've really technically been a part of the wrestling business for like 30 years. If you look at it, like, man, like they're in WWF, they're in WCW, they're in ECW. I mean, TNA.
For sure. Who was the first one to give them a chance? Was it ECW?
I think so. Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
And then WWF and WCW. Yep.
Yes, that makes sense. And they were pretty good workers too.
Yeah, not bad at all. And I actually love them on commentary, which might be silly, but I always thought they were awesome on commentary.
So I might have mentioned this before on the shows, during the height of my fandom, right? Like, I mean, you can always buy like from like, those dubbers or whatever, any wrestling tapes, but like in terms of the mainstream, I try and buy anything that was like in the stores. So I bought the championship wrestling, and it was like overdubbed over like hardcore matches. And I was like, what is this garbage? And I couldn't watch more than a few minutes of it. It kind of reminded me of like bump fights or something like that. Not a fan of that at the time, but certainly they've done a lot for pro wrestling and different iterations of it. And when I'm looking for something just to watch a little bit, I like to go back to like Tracy Smothers egging on a crowd at the gathering, those sort of things, which was fun. Like, Bob Backlund against Ken Patera, like, in 2015 or whatever, whatever the date was, like crazy matches like that.
All right, Lavi, we did it. A little bit of a marathon recording today, but we did it. Let's hit the plugs. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at 2Man Power Trip. Check out the website, tmptempire.com. Lavi, what do you got?
Yeah, follow me on Twitter, Laviemarg, Laviemarg. Check out our LinkedIn group, The Business of the Business. And lest we forget, very important, PW Ponderings. We're the official business podcast of PW Ponderings. Go check out their website for the latest results, the latest on the collective, and this week in women's wrestling.
And, I know you love that LinkedIn group more than anything, for sure.
It's a unique position in the marketplace. So I'm trying to continue to grow that. And for a group that's fairly young, we have some amazing influencers in the group, crossing over from Fight to AEW executives, all across the board.
All right. Awesome. Lavi, thank you. And thank you, everybody out there, for listening. We'll see you right back here next week for a little business of the business. See you next week, folks.